Yes. So we are on the first chapter. We are reading the second small chapter of Saint Maximus. The first one was about prayer and about love of God. That when we pray without distraction, only then we love God. If we can't pray without distraction, we don't love God. But our mind loves wherever it goes by the things. If it loves the things by which we are being distracted. I get the little help this week with pronunciation, but I'm not sure if I making it right. Distracted, distracted. This is better, sounds better. Distraction. But distraction, to distract, to destroy something, and to be distracted actually may sound close, but it's the same thing. You see, spiritually it has the same meaning. If you are being distracted, you are being destroyed, like spiritually. So I'll try my best, but uh, I apologized in the very beginning for my English, but that's I'm trying. That's kind of the best I can do at this moment. But I'll try. I'll try to get better. So we covered the first little chapter, and we are in the middle of the second little chapter of Saint Maximus the Confessor, which sounds like this. We will read the whole chapter again, and then we'll continue. The mind that deals with a sensory object clearly has some passion for it, such as desire or sorrow or anger or resentment, unless it despises the object. It cannot be freed from the passion. So here in this little second chapter, Saint Maximus is showing us what is this distraction, why we can't pray with attention to God, and we learn that the obstacles for our prayer is our passions. If we focus our mind on something other than God, some kind of passion is laying under there. And one of the four, he talks about the four most common ones. And those are desire, sorrow, anger, and resentment. And we were talking about them more or less in details, like precisely about each one. We covered each passion. And we started to read the explanation for this last verse. Unless it despises the object, it cannot be freed from the passion. And if I remember correctly, we immediately jumped to our relationship with our neighbors, with people around, because somehow our passions are connected with this relationship, usually. Okay, I will start a little bit. Maybe I will repeat. Let's repeat one paragraph from what we read last time, and then we will continue. And what is the passion that troubles you? it is easy for a person to discover what kind of passion he suffers from, whether it is desire, sorrow, anger, or resentment, or some other passion. I see someone, for example, and right away a negative thought enters my mind. This means that I see something or understand something differently than he does. I go and talk to him, we discuss the matter, and I see that he is correct. But later on, in a similar situation, the same negative thought enters my mind, which means that I have accomplished nothing. And 1,000 excuses and explanations, 1,000 confessions to the person in question, or to my spiritual father, or to the icon of Christ, 1,000 tears, an endless number of prostrations will accomplish nothing. If that is, I don't change my mind, if I don't change the way I think about others and learn to live with them, I must enter into a fullness of relation with others. He's talking about our relationship with other people, because this is the area where most of our passions work, why we have problems. We started with the first commandment, the most important, about love of God, because we were talking about prayer and we were talking how the prayer is connected to the love of God. And we realized that we do not love God because we cannot pray without distraction. So now he is talking why we can't pray without distraction. Because passions are working and he's in us, within us, and he's showing us that all these passions are connected to our relationship, most of them, with other people, which means that we do not love each other first. And in order even to approach love of God, first we have to try and learn to love our neighbor. As Christ said, on these two commandments, all the law is hanging, is based. And love to our neighbor is like a path, like a way to the love of God. So we start on this first thing, first level, and then we will be able to approach God. And here he says, you see, that we are not changing. In order to do this commandment, to fulfill it, to love our neighbor, we have to change our mind. If we don't, even in minor things, we may fix some troubles in our relationship. We can talk to someone, we can go to confession, but this passion, if it exists in our heart, it will keep returning. And as he says, years can pass and we accomplish nothing. My disposition toward them, toward people around me, must be one of love. Otherwise, my thoughts will always fly away and get the better of me, and I will remain a person filled with passions, even if I am correct in thinking that there is something wrong with the other person. So you see, for the love, for the relationship, it doesn't matter if you are right or not. This is how the relationships in world are being exercised or is happening. Like we think that we are always right, and therefore we cannot approach love. We cannot feel love. It doesn't matter if you are right or wrong. Only when I can love the other person can I be free of my false and corrupt love. Only then can I be free of my old way of thinking and free from the passion that holds me in its grip. I need, in other words, to disdain and despise whatever I was holding on to and to think in a manner consistent with the way that other thinks. We have to think in a consistent way, not opposite way to the way that our neighbor thinks. And this reminded me the little place from another book, from explanation of writings of Abba Isaiah. And he talks about all this in more depth over there. And very interesting. He says there are many questions, and what if I not agree? What if this is against my principles or my way of thinking? What then? What should I do? Should I kind of betray my principles? What if it's about faith and stuff like that? And he says very interesting things. He says, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He even gives an example. We know that of course, he was an abbot on Mount Athos, and he was standing firmly and was understanding how important it is to keep the traditions in the church, to keep our faith unbroken, or to stand whole there. And then he offered this example. He says, okay, imagine that another person comes to you and he says, you know how it is like everything these times, look at this, we need to change calendar, make it like same like with the world. We have to make language more understandable, make things more easy in the church. And he tries to tell you all these like liberal things which you're against against it. And he says what to answer to this person. Of course, like normally thinking, you would immediately start arguing with him. You would start to present your point of and try to convince him in what is truth, what is right, uh, in your opinion. And all this, he says, will create separation between. There will be no unity anymore, and there will be no love. And this unity we need in order to be united with God. And he says this like very weird and amazing thing. Like I was very surprised. He said, agree with him. He said, if he thinks this way, you will not convince him. You will not convince him, at least by this fighting with words. It will not bring any benefit. It will just separate you. Say, yeah, you're right. I agree with you. And this way, you will fulfill this commandment, like to have one thoughts, to be one. Like we are talking, of course, about our brothers and sisters in faith, right? We are not gonna agree with if we, it's not, he's not talking about another faith or like, Muslims or something. Yeah, I agree with your faith. But it's within the church, within the members of our church. This is where all these uh, disagreements happening. And this is what Christ was praying about. He was praying about the church. We to be one. This is why Apostle Paul is begging us. He says, I'm begging you, have one thought. Because if we are not, we cannot be with God. And how can we have one thought? By fighting with others and trying to change their way of thinking? This is what Christ meant, and this is what Paul was talking about. Elder Aemilianos says, no, we have to change our way of thinking. At least he says, yeah, and he says, and what if I'm like thinking completely different? What if I think, excuse me, that this is extremely important to keep traditions, to keep calendar, to keep language in that particular question. He says, agree with him, remain with him one at this particular moment. And when he keeps his ways in the life, like he leaves, he go away, and you keep walking on your road. And then when you return to your life, to your ways, then you return to your way of thinking. When your way of thinking is not ruining the union anymore with your brother, when it is not so dangerous, when it is not breaking this wish of God, we to remain one, and not breaking this commandment of Apostle Paul. So, in a manner, so to think, I need, in other words, to disdain and despise whatever I was holding on to, and to think in a manner consistent with the way the other thinks. This is very important, he says. And now this is where we stop. And now we will continue explanation, because this explanation to this little, like, this little verse at the end is very long, and we just started it. I remind you that we are reading explanation for this little verse. Unless the mind despises the object, it cannot be freed from passion. So basically what we are talking about, we are talking about a way to defeat the passion. He is offering the way to get healed. How can we get healed, and how can we get rid of this sickness? And what if you will surely ask, the other person does not think correctly? In that case, I can have my own opinion, but in my dealings with this other person, I will conduct myself in a manner consistent with the way he thinks. Exactly what I was just talking about. He was talking about this in another book, in another explanation, in more details, but it's the same thought repeatedly. In my relation with him, I will incline toward his opinion about things, even though this may create some inner tension for me. Of course, you see, can you imagine this tension? When somebody talks to you about things that are for you, like like fundamental, like this is like foundation of your faith. You think it is so important. It is like life or death for you. Some tension. It can create a lot of tension. But you see, despite this tension, you have to incline toward his opinion in your this little conversation with him when you met him. When I am by myself and dealing with some other matter that concerns only myself, I will do what I believe is right. This is when you have your freedom. Because love is not freedom. Love is not. But when we are with someone else, we will do what he wants, okay? Desires. That's the first passion. We will do what he believes should be done. Unless, of course, what he wants to do is sinful. So he separates things in two big groups. Of course, there is open sin, and he's not talking about. This is not the area where we should agree, right, with open sin. But all this, like different opinions, when it can be done this way, or it can be done that way. It's, for me, it is very remarkable that he puts even like such traditional and important things as calendar, as language, as the ways how we behave in church. We know that in different churches, especially here in America, we see this, how to say, these little differences in traditions. We know you enter Russian church, it's a little different. If you go to Russia, enter of a church over there, it will be even more like strict and different. In Antiochian churches, different. In Greek churches, a little different. So all these little differences in traditions, he says, has nothing to do with sin. This is not a matter of faith. This is not a question. Of course, it's not desirable, and we see the benefit of one thing and of another. But he says, okay, it is your choice when it is concerning you. You choose the best for yourself. But this, we are one church still. This is you like this way, somebody like the other way. When you are with other, or you're visiting another church, there is in Russia there is even saying, nobody comes to someone else's monastery with his own rules. So you respect, you you behave accordingly to the place. So it's interesting thing that he says this has nothing to do with sin, all these little differences, and therefore it can be a cause for divisions. Nowadays with coronavirus and other things like arose, how somebody is performing communion. Like I listened to one guy from Russia and he says, wow, what kind of question you are asking? Okay, I'm before it's even in Russia, because in Russia now, in different churches, different approaches too, because different priests, do different things, offer communion in a different way, despite the recommendations, but everybody do it accordingly to his uh, understanding what he thinks the best. And he talks to somebody and he says, wow, by asking even, like before I go to church, I will ask what is the way they give communion over there. Do they like put this spoon in alcohol or they don't? Are they kissing icons or they don't? And this all create divisions. Create divisions. Why in our minds? Because we are thinking about the things that are have nothing to do with sin, have nothing to do with faith, but it's just the different ways of exercising our faith, like different um, like a little different traditions, we could say, right? Some why the person is doing a certain way? Oh, because he doesn't have faith. We immediately start to judge, and we think why we don't go there. What we think, Holy Spirit is not operating there. In our mind, we create a schism when we think this way. We separate ourselves with our brothers and sisters. And what is the way he is offering against this? What's the medicine? Humility, obedience. Make you think that it is bad to do this way? Okay, when you will be a priest, you in your church will do it the way you think is right. Now you are coming over there. Incline at this moment, at least at the moment of your visit to the church, incline your thoughts towards the way it is being done in this particular place, in this particular moment, to preserve this unity, which is for you important in first place, because you are separating yourself from your brothers and sisters, from this parish, from this priest, and through this from God. Despite you think that you are more right, you are the one who is like carrying truth, maybe, you think this way. It's just an example. And you think you are with God, and they're all maybe not, but in fact, everything is completely opposite. You see, that's what he says. That's how he explains it, and I find it very interesting. So, of course, unless what he wants to do is sin. Yeah, and what is sinful, of course, we can uh, be very creative in that too. But what is sinful, we can find in gospel. It's very clear what is sinful. Uh, like to different traditions, it's just different cultures. It's just different ways of thinking, different things. The sinful is what is sinful is described in the gospel in commandments of God. Between what I want and what he wants. Okay, he's talking about the relationship with another person. Usually it's like a clash of desires, wills. It happens all the time in the families, between family members, in the parish. Like look at what's happening at the parish councils and stuff, like the clash of like opinions and wills. We think that everybody thinks he's right. Between what I want and what he wants, there is no middle ground. There is no compromise. No compromise solution. Every attempt to compromise, every argument, explanation, and attempt to persuade, persuade, persuade the other is simply the self, the ego. the ego. Thank you. By the way, thank you for these things. Like when you help me, I with many words I learned like some little better. Like ego. Now I know answered, not answered. Answered, and pronunciation is also important. Ego. So taking its stand, like an irrational animal that digs its hind feet, hind feet into the ground and refuses to budge. And this is nothing less than my eternal separation from the other and from God. Ooh, did you hear? Did you hear that? I'll read it again, despite there are many difficult words. Every attempt, listen carefully, to compromise, every argument, explanation, and attempt to persuade the other is simply the self. This is, we think we are defending truth, like when we arguing, when we fighting. We think we are fighting for truth, but he says, no, this is your ego is expressing itself and standing on it, like holding its grounds. Simply the self, the ego, taking its stand, like an irrational animal that digs its hind feet into the ground and refuses to budge. So you see, he says like when we get stubborn in things, we become like animals, like just stubborn, like a donkey. Sometimes you just can't move him. He's, he's, he's like this. And this is nothing less than my eternal separation from the other and from God. So all my desires, all my points of view, when I am holding them in this way, in this passionate way, when I am not able to even like make a step aside for the sake of commandment, for the sake of love, put myself like accept the opinion of your neighbor for the sake of this peace, is like passionate. We become like animals, uh, which of course I think he means how far away we get from spiritual state, and from other and from God. You see, eternal separation. The way I order and regulate my personal inner journey is one thing. And the way I order my relations with my fellow human beings is another. So you see, these are two different things. If we desire to fulfill this prayer of Christ in Golgotha, when he was asking his Father to help us, let them be one so that they can be one with us. If we want to work towards preserving this unity, creating this unity, right, in the church, we have to separate, make this line between our personal inner journey, what we think about, what is wrong, what is right, our opinions, not have them in this passionate way. And another thing is our relations with my fellow human beings. This is completely another way, which means that this is the area where we have to sacrifice our own desires, our own opinions, and learn this humility. Learn to put ourselves in the second place and prefer opinion of our brother, of our neighbor. Okay, we can stop a little bit and look at that question. Let's see. Here is the question. I am having division with an Orthodox brother right now who keeps sending me pro-Trump stuff. He likes Trump and I don't. So should I agree with him just to have peace? You see, very interesting question. The question even is not about faith. I hope, yeah, this was to everyone. If you have personal question, you can send them to me, but this was for everyone. But I will, anyway, I will not say the name. I don't know. Person ready for this. This is not even area of the faith and of the church. This is area of politics. And this is how often this happening, that even the questions from outside of our faith are separating us. Based on what we just read, of course the answer, you are not arguing with him. How did the question sound again? So should I agree with him just to have peace? Yes. As I understand what we just read, you should agree and preserve peace. I am able to make these kinds of distinctions, but I must make them properly, lawfully, with love and absolute respect for the other as the image of God, in a manner that enables me to venerate him and to believe that he is a saint and I am a sinner. Absolute respect for the other as the image of God. Okay. And now he's talking, I think, after he said that there are two different sides, right? One side is our relationship and another what we think for ourselves. It's two. But now he's talking about this part when you are on your own and when you realize that you think differently than other people. But in your relationship at this point, it's not creating divisions. But you see, he makes a note about it because we have to be very careful knowing that you know our point of view is different. Like for example, in this case, you agree with your opponent about politics, right? Like he thinks that Trump is the best solution. You think the other guy. So being with him, you agree with him, or the other way around. That it doesn't matter. And you say, yes, I agree with you. But then he leaves, and on your own, you return to your own way of thinking. And this is what he's talking about here. When you are on your own, he says, I am able to make this kind of distinctions, but I must make them properly, lawfully, with love and absolute respect. So even when he left and you return to your point of view, you have to preserve respect to this another person. Keep love for him in your mind instead of judging, oh he's like a stupid, like stupid guy. How he thinks like that? That this another one will be better. You know, be careful about that. He's saying. in a manner that enables me to venerate him, even venerate him, and to believe. Why venerate? Because there is image of God in every person. This is the meaning of this second commandment. We love God, first commandment. The second, why we should love other people? Because they are like little walking icons of God. And if you do not venerate these little icons, how can you venerate the, the God Himself? If you hate these icons, this hatred you project to the first image, how you say it in English, like prototype, exactly. You project it over there. This is why it is so important to preserve love with our brothers and sisters, our neighbors. Venerate him and to believe that he is a saint and I am a sinner, because this is the only way to preserve this love, this humility. If you don't, if you get in pride, you think you are a saint and he is a sinner, you will always judge and condemn him. Only then do I have the right to continue my journey independently of him, without, however, losing the internal bond that unites me to him. You see, only then, if you preserve this love unbroken, this unity unbroken, if you have this respect to this other opinion, I mean, these things are so little importance in comparison to our unity of the church. So little importance. Who's gonna be president? Literally, it doesn't matter. Isn't this understandable? Of course, one probably will be better, another worse, but again, in different minds, this will be different. In some people's minds, it's like one, in another's another. But the one will be who God let be. That's all. And you can't do much. You think your voice will do the change? I doubt. I doubt. But of course, you participate. You give your voice, but keep calm. I mean, keep do it like, should we participate as Christians? Of course we should, because we at the same time we are part of society. But see that we have to understand this difference, because this world is anyway going its way, and we won't be able to change the world. What we have to try to change is our own mind first, at least. If something should happen to separate us, this is not from God. So simple and so straight like thought, right? Anything, in other words, he says, anything what separates us is not from God. Because God does not want our separation. It is better to say, sorry, it is better to stay with a person who is wrong and go together with him into hell than to go to paradise alone. Because if you arrive there by yourself, you'll find that the door will be closed. Ooh, and this is like finally, he just like removed all the other questions. Like, what if this? What if this? Even, you see, this unity is more important than truth, besides God, of course. Anything we may think is truth and right and being correct. Because like being right is not important. because you may remain right and find yourself in front of closed doors to paradise, because because you separated yourself with your neighbor, you broke the commandment because you think you are right. It is better to stay with the person who is wrong. Stay meaning in unity, stay one together, and go together with him into hell than to go to paradise alone. Because if you arrive there by yourself, you'll find that the door will be closed. This is very strong expressions and very like strong things. But he probably chooses this way of presenting us these thoughts because he is very confident in it. Going with the other means that I deny myself. It means that you are moving in a manner not unlike God, in a manner appropriate and fitting to God. Because God said, you remember, if you want to follow me, deny yourself, take up your cross and follow. And what is fitting to God? The denial of myself, the emptying of myself in order to be filled by God. So take a note, we are still talking about love of God. We are still talking about the prayer. And when we started to talk, to read about the prayer, he said we have to empty ourselves in order to be able to pray, in order to be able to love. And here, all this, what we were talking, he explained more deeply things that usually fulfill us and what we think are so important. And this is right, this is truth, our point of view. And we're gonna fight to death, like, defending them. And he says, it's not important. And we just simply have to throw it away and poor, become poor in spirit in order to obtain, to get the kingdom. You see how interesting it is. In order for this to happen, we must first uncover our passions. So you see, how to make ourselves empty. Because why did we get so full in first place? Because demons, because passions, we were reading the other book, Abba Dorotheus, these great saints, Barsanofius the Great, he openly says, passions are demons. So basically, this is work of evil spirits. This is how evil spirits own our soul. We belong to them through passion, through our passions, through our diseases. And this is how they stuff us with all these things, all our life. Not leaving like a little room for God to enter. And when we start looking for God, we have to get rid of all those stuff. We just have to empty ourselves, clean, make this big cleaning to make room for God. So he will be able to come. Because if there is room, he comes. He cannot come if we don't give him place. So In order to do that, where we start, we have to uncover our passions. That's where it starts, because all this authority over us is happening, of these evil spirits is happening through the passions. But the passions, as a rule, are things that are hidden. We are not aware of their influence. Most of the people and most of the time we think we just live our lives. But when we start to awake and when eyes of our mind start to open, we start to realize that all our actions, all our words, most of it are influenced by our diseases, by our spiritual diseases, by passions. This is why Saint Maximus tells us that in order to enter into ourselves, we must hold the reins of the self-deity and look deeply into ourselves and observe what is taking place, so that we might be able to understand and articulate whatever is at work inside us. So start to pay attention to all these things. And do you remember when we just started reading this book, he says the prayer, our prayer rule. When we try to pray to God, even if we are not able to pray without distraction, this time is very valuable. Why? Because we are starting to notice things that enter our mind. And by noticing it, we will be able to uncover our passions. So at our level, at this level, prayer is not that much conversation with God as like our process of our healing and diagnosis, making diagnosis and uncovering the passions. But this is like the first step. This is where it starts. For instance, the monastery decides to let a field lie fallow. But in your mind, you immediately object. How often this happens, right? Even in the parish. Parish may decide. Priest decides something, and we like, it's not only in the monastery, it's everywhere. In the families, at work, in all our relationships, we object things. This is not right. This is not right. We have to, this is not wise. But you'll say, this isn't right. It will cost us. We will have less to eat, and so on. And this is in monastery, of course, he's talking to monks, I repeat again. But this is how this worldly way of thinking is arise in monks, arise in monastery. You think monastery is the place of saints where angels only praise God? No. These worldly people, full of passions, they came there to become saints, and they start to deal with these passions. But as you see from other example, and now he's talking, it can take years for someone to you know make this change in his mind, because he still thinks like that he's right in the monastery, what to do, like that abbot doesn't do right, and other. So it's basically the same thing what he was doing in the world. He just changed his dress. So again, but you will say, this isn't right. It will cost us. We will have less to eat, and so on. In your mind, you think you are defending what is right and just. You believe that you are only concerned about the interests of the monastery. This is our beliefs. We think we are like debating truths. You think your heart is filled with love and that you are right. But listen to what Saint Maximus is telling you. When your mind keeps returning to something, in this case, the field in question, it means that what you have inside yourself is not justice, truth, or love, but passion. When I come to understand that a cause is producing a certain effect and that my mind's attachment to something is the effect, that it is the result of a cause, and that this cause is a passion, then in that very same moment, I uncover the passion. So you see, he just described simply how this happening, the step, first step. Like in any disease, like in the hospital, when they bring the patient like in the emergency room, first thing they have to do is to make a diagnosis, right? Diagnosis. So, yeah. This is the first. If they don't say what kind of disease is this correctly, they won't be able to help. Same thing happening with us. In order to approach this warfare, spiritual warfare, with the passions that are within us, first of all, we have to make this diagnosis. We have to uncover the passions. And this is how prayer is helping. We pray our rule. This is what should happen on our prayer rule. Not like, oh, I have to stand again 10 minutes and read these prayers, the same prayer. Boring. Boring because we are not doing, we are not able to pray because we are full of passions. Of course, we don't have connection with God. That's understandable. But we are not even using this time to go towards that connection. And it will start from locating our passions, uncovering them, and then hopefully he will tell us what to do next. But first is to uncover. And here he described very simply, how this happening. When I come to understand, so it's happening here in our mind through understanding. When I come to understand, not understanding in general, oh yes, I understand that passions they are, but when we pray and we get distracted, one time, another time, by some sensory object, and then we understand that this particular object coming of is a cause, is a result of cause, and this cause is a passion. This is when we uncover. We'll read again. When I come to understand that a cause is producing a certain effect, that nothing happens accidentally in other words, right? It's not just momentarily thing, as he was saying, passing by. And that my mind's attachment to something is the effect. And why we are getting distracted? Because we got attached to something, to some object, to thought, to image, to the person, to situation, to think. And this is effect. Our attachment is effect. That it is the result of a cause, and that the cause is a passion, then in that very same moment, I uncover the passion. Otherwise, it would be like hearing a noise and saying that it was caused by the cicadas or the birds, to which someone says, no, it was not. But the sound had to come from somewhere. It had to have a source. No, no, it was nothing. The sound you heard came from nothing. This is what we do when we insist that we have no passions within us, as if the things taking place in our soul had no cause. I said before that explanation of this little verse is very long. So we will stop a little bit. We will take a look at what time it is. Okay, it's 1 hour already. And let's see the question. Okay, interesting question. Okay, we are returning to this relationship because basically the second question is about the same thing what the first one was about this relationship. This is really like interesting thing. Is it acceptable to avoid the topic of disagreement? I would feel it's lying if I agreed with their opinion. It would be lying, I think, if you will not be able to humble yourself. If you will try to avoid the topic, this is not, you will not look for unity. This is not looking for unity. This is basically, you will hide yourself from him. You will close in yourself. You will try to escape from this unity with him. He thinks that you should agree temporarily. Make your point of view flexible, because you are thinking it's so important. Lying. It would be lying not against God. It would be lying against your own like beliefs, your own point of view, your own idols, we could say. Because God is asking, is looking for something different. I think if you feel weak, if you are not ready yet to do this, to humble yourself, you can try to avoid the topic. But I think what he's talking about, this humility, this agreement, right, with your neighbor, covering with love, this relationship is something higher, something more important. Let's stop here because some very important things we will cover today. Any other questions? Have you seen a need for this message now, especially when everyone is so divided, it seems, especially in the church during COVID-19? Yes, I mentioned this. I mentioned this earlier, that it's disagreements. I gave this example about like traditions in the church, but the COVID-19 just uncover our passions. It it works like a it it works like a tool. God gave something to help us, and you see how we seemed to be in unity until this COVID-19 comes, and it like, as a temptation, as a test, and we got separated. So what kind of unity we had in first place? And this message, of course, can be delivered. And but unfortunately, this words that Christ says in the gospel about hearing, about those who have ears, they will hear, and some will not. Because you see how people, instead of exercising, doing what we are talking about, instead of humbling themselves. Basically, it was everything I was talking about all these years about humility. We have to humble ourselves, humble. So it was like kind of, we were learning. And here the day of examination comes. So, you know, who will pass the test? And, you know, some people didn't pass. And you think you will be able to convince them now somehow? By what? By arguing with them? I doubt. Basically, people choose their way of thinking. They make their choice. And in history of church, this was happening by various reasons. What happened in like old believers schism? What that happened in Russia when the important things, maybe, but things that didn't have anything with faith, but were about traditions, caused the division in those who were very zealous, and they were thinking they are staying on the right position, they are defending the truth, but in fact, they became separated from the church. So in other words, they separated themselves from the church. They were not able to humble themselves. And this is what's happening now. Who is those like COVID-19 dissidents? Like zealous people who are try to stand for truth, like exactly like in this example. They are thinking that they are defending truth, they are defending faith. But what he said, I don't want to judge, I have no idea. I'm just taking the example. He says, there is no truth, there is no faith, there are passions. Uncovered, hidden passions, and very dangerous. So we have to pray. This is time of test. The church is being tested. Uh, nothing can happen without God's permission. And in a way, every test is like a little judgment. A little judgment when angels being sent with an assignment to separate wheat from weeds. But we have this hope that in this like big scale, Lord said, leave the weeds grow. among the weak. So because who knows, repentance is open for everyone, this to find this way of unity. But we have to be very careful. What I can say is that the cause of any schism is pride. How in Psalms it said, scattered the pride ones by their own fault. And therefore, this way of humility, which is presented by saints, is very important for us, very important. Yeah, God help us. Difficult times, and I don't know, if you feel you can deliver this message, try, you can try with a lot of humility, just sharing the thoughts of the saints,